Well, here we are. It is yet another week. Boy, it just feels like 2024 is flying by as rapidly. Maybe it's just because we've been so swamped with everything, but it feels like we blinked twice and January is coming to a close. But good day, Brenda. How are you?
There's
Yeah,
never, ever a day that you can predict.
yeah, yeah. I didn't have your mic on there for a second. I think I forgot. So, um, yeah, sessions are crazy. A lot of people don't know what that looks like. So before we dive into that, though, let me get to our sponsors. We want to say a special thank you to FPEA for being one of our top sponsors. We love and appreciate you. We know that you guys are off on a cruise right now. We hope that you're enjoying that because you've got a lot of work to do when you get back throwing that convention together. And we look forward to seeing all of that hard work come to fruition. And we also want to skip over. Let me actually move a couple of things around here. We want to skip on over to our website. We have some new sponsors or new people for our recognition wall. I did have someone who joined our recognition wall and did not give me a logo to share. So, oh, Brenda, I lost you here on the sharing thing. Here we are. I'll fix that in a second. But yeah, on our recognition wall, we've added homeschool evaluations and consultations by Joanne Stead. Joanne, thank you for joining our recognition wall. Let's get a little cheer going on for Joanne. It's always great to watch the community kind of grow and spread, and the support that we need come through. We're so thankful for that. But there's just so much to talk about and so little time to do it. So I wanted to do its due diligence and talk and say thank you to all of those people. But we have so much to cover. It has been a wild legislative session, and this is my first one through as a registered lobbyist. So I'm not used to whether or not they go fast or slow or intense or how. And Brenda's giving me the guided tour, but things have been oddly rushed, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I think the problem that they are facing now is because they didn't have any bills heard prior to session starting January the 9th. And this bill that we've been working on wasn't even filed until January the 6th. And then it was on the first committee agenda,
Right.
like 3 days later.
Like instantly. Yeah.
So it has been a very different, unusual session. Like we feel like we're running as fast as we can, but we can't catch up, can't get ahead.
Yeah, it feels that way. And I don't want to name names, but it seems like every time we've made a connection and gotten an invitation to come speak, even Crystal got a personal invitation from one of them to come um, talk about some of these issues. We just keep getting rescheduled on and pushed out. And it just so happens to be after that next committee meeting or after this committee meeting. And I'm a little confused. I'm like, oh, these things are so important to be heard before these committee meetings. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's kind of the nature of what we uh, kind of the urgent attention needed message that we put out. I think most of you have seen that by now. If not, go ahead and share it. Brenda, do you want to roll through that with everyone and kind of go through what it is we're asking for and why?
Sure, but let me do a little background. Um,
Yes.
our philosophy, mine particularly, over the last 35 years, is that you have a job to do at home and you don't need to be running to the Capitol all the time or spending your time on the phone trying to reach people unless you have really good connections and can get to somebody I can't get to. So we don't put out too many alerts or call to actions, because if we can do the work here in Tallahassee, and believe me, there is a lot of work to do on these bills. Just to give you a little idea, before we went to the first committee meeting, Jason and Crystal and I spent a lot of time trying to analyze the bill, figure out exactly what it did. So when we went to the committee to speak, we could speak intelligently on the bill and explain why we were not happy with the bill. In fact, we opposed the bill as it stood.
Right.
Then we actually wrote language, and we spent a lot of time working on that so that we could tell the legislators exactly what we wanted or what we needed to change the bill so that it would make it better for parents and all parents. Let me just say that, because
Surely.
FESUA is also in this bill. And
Mm-hmm.
with the Step Up for Students, especially, they're trying to automate everything so that it moves faster, people get their money quicker, there's less, what's the word? Uh,
Oversight.
Subjective decision making by their
Right.
processors. Um, so they have good intentions, but as a result, they have merged as much as possible the two purchasing guides for FESUA and PEP. And that's their goal, is to get them the same. They won't get them exactly the same because the current statutes specify different things for the two, but that was their goal long range. And so this is really going to affect all parents, and we're just fighting to try to keep as much freedom for parents in general as possible. Um, so we spent a lot of time working on that, and then we have been to every committee meeting speaking about this, and we haven't had a lot of parents come up. Crystal did a fabulous job when she
You
spoke
did.
on behalf of parents, and she really has the insight, because we're getting a lot of feedback from parents in our forum.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, but every session there usually is a time lag between the first committee and the second committee. This year, the bill was referenced to the first committee the first week of session. The next week it was moved to the next committee of reference, and then the third week, which is this week, it's in the last committee of reference. We've seen no amendments to this bill. That's not saying they're not preparing some, but we should know by 5 o'clock this afternoon if there are going to be committee amendments filed to this
Amendments.
bill. If not, they'll be late filed. So what we're hoping is, by having parents call and ask for them to either, number one, delay the bill in this committee, which is what we've asked them to do, so that we can get an opportunity to talk to the decision makers there,
Right.
or that they will come out with an amendment, which will be what we call a strike all, which means the way it reads is everything after the enacting clause, which means the first few lines in the bill. Everything will be
Mm-hmm.
stricken, and they'll put in a new amendment, a whole new bill. We're hoping that's what happens in this committee, because the next stop is the House floor. And the
Mm-hmm.
confusing part on this bill is there is no companion bill in the Senate at all. So normally bills work their way through on both sides, House and Senate, and then they kind of come to the point of going to the floor, and one or the
Mm-hmm.
other bill goes to the floor, and then they have the other chamber will vote on the bill or amend it and send it back. But since there's nothing in the Senate at this point, we're not sure what they're going to do, whether they just send this bill over and the Senate
Hmm.
takes up this bill by referring it to their committees. And it would be the pre-K through 12 education committee, and then it will go to an appropriation committee, and then it
Hmm.
would go to the floor. Chances are we won't have an opportunity to amend this bill in the Senate because they're working it through so fast at the last minute. Because it would have to go to two committees in the Senate. So by the time it passes off of the floor, it'd be the fourth week of session. And then it would go over to the Senate. And by the time they get it on an agenda, you're in the fifth week. And then the next committee would be the sixth week. It would go to the floor, which would be the seventh or eighth. What did I say? Seventh week. And then they would have to take up the House bill as is, because you're down to the last week of session, and sending it back and forth takes up time. They would have time to do that, but at this point, we don't know what the plan is. So we're just trying to get intel.
Right. Yeah. And were you trying to say something, Crystal?
No, my phone rang.
Oh, I thought I
I
heard.
muted it.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard something. Okay. It's been interesting watching our online community go wild alongside of that, and I think it's really important. You and I were discussing kind of some of the things perhaps going on in the background, or why, what are some of these delays? What are some of the issues? Not 100% certain, because we didn't say anything controversial in the committee meeting. We didn't step on anyone's toes. We weren't combative or hostile whenever we spoke and stated what our needs are. So it's not necessarily a blockade that we've introduced. We're trying to find our way around an obstacle in getting these meetings that doesn't seem to be of our making necessarily. So what is it? We do know that um, there's a lot of arguments happening on Facebook. I was looking at Reddit posts earlier today, and there's a lot of Facebook groups and communities kind of almost at war with each other. And it's really important that we are aware, as home educators, what we look like to people who have no clue what home education looks like. Um, we can argue till we're blue in the face about the finer points of whether or not PEP parents are real homeschool parents, etc. We had someone on last week who has both a PEP student in their home and a child that's home educated in their home. And when you look at the purchasing guide for Step Up for Students, and it talks about what the funds can be used on for PEP in a home education program, it specifically states not private, not public, not charter, all of these other things. And by default, that means that it's left mirroring home education. So we just need to be very careful how we treat each other, but especially how we interact with our representatives when it comes to trying to have our concerns be heard. It's very important that we acknowledge the efforts of parents to direct the education for their children, and that's ultimately what we're trying to promote and make as free as possible. Some people have said that in the spirit of making sure that there's less government oversight and restrictions, we really hope this brings restrictions on PEP. I'm not left scratching my head on the math, because the basic math doesn't add up. Um, I get what they're trying to say. I just think that they don't necessarily realize how they're saying it, how it comes across. The words that we choose and how we choose to interact with each other and our representatives do matter. And if the representatives get many, many, many calls, and the calls are convoluted or saying things like when we were talking about the teaching materials, some people were saying, oh, my kids are not going to be able to take electives. This is going to take all electives and fine arts out of. It's not, though. That's not what the changes to HB 1403 are suggesting to doing. It's very specifically talking about equipment used as teaching materials. And so when we're not using the language that really addresses the concern, they go, "Oh, these home educating parents don't even understand themselves, much less the issues. Just sit back and let us make the decisions for you."
That's what the
You know?
legislators think.
Right. That's what the legislators are left thinking when we come at them without a unified voice. So we want to
And
be very. Go ahead.
no, finish your sentence. I thought you were through. Sorry.
I was just going to say we want to be very careful in how we communicate with each other, to instead of looking for arguments, looking for ways to better understand the difficult issues and the nuances, and really truly seek that understanding, because then we do all have needs. We do all have rights and concerns that need to be addressed as parents directing our children's education. And there are people who want to see home education at every level, in every way that it looks, disappear. And they would just love for that to go away. In fact, we had the support of someone who was in that arena simply because it already exists in statute. And it was nice to hear at least her have such a base, I don't want to say baseline, but a balanced point of view on something she disagrees with. But because it exists already, she wanted to make sure that it was treated fairly as all the other options parents could choose from. She does not agree with home education and doesn't like it. And that there are other people who are far more hostile. So it's just very important that we are careful in our communication and considerate and intending to look for understanding, to build bridges, not walls. Go ahead, Brenda. What were you going to say? Sorry.
I was going to say that uh, people who are home educating now have no idea what it was like in 1984 and 85. People were being prosecuted for home educating their children back in 1984 and 5, beginning in 82. And then when Craig and I decided to try to change the law, there was considerable opposition among the different homeschool groups, HSLDA, FPEA. We weren't organized as the Home Education Foundation then. We were just two parents with great concerns because after we started working on the legislation, the Department of Education, who was encouraging the prosecutions, had our phone numbers and knew exactly how to reach us. And so we really put our family on the line because we could have also been prosecuted or cases filed against us in court. But when we got to the Capitol, we did not have a unified voice. And the groups were fighting each other in the Capitol, and it almost resulted in the home education law not passing. And they were nuancing over words that meant basically the same thing, but it was our
Mhm.
version or our version or their version. And that's exactly what happened to the Senate sponsor when people said, well, we don't want that bill. We want this bill. We want this language. And she finally she was going to take the House bill, which we had worked on and is basically what passed. But when it got to the Senate, her bill was the original bill, which said that parents could home educate their children, but they had to have them evaluated by a psychologist at the end of the year. That was it. And because the department felt like at that point they were very negative toward homeschooling, but they felt like
Mhm.
the lady pushing this that we were psychologically damaging our children. We
Mhm.
had a lot of problems. And so the Senate sponsor uh, decided instead of taking the House version, she was going to go back to her original version, and and so that bill almost failed. But just by an act of God, it passed. And but that's what results when people of the same team decide to fight each other in the Capitol. Now,
Right.
everything in this bill is not going to be of interest to every parent.
Hmm.
And
Right.
what we did is we sat down and looked at every single part of the bill that could affect
Hmm.
the freedom of parents, regardless of which parents they were, which
Right.
scholarship they took. And then we went through and wrote language specifically for that. Now, some people only care about the instructional material language, but there are other
Hmm.
people that are concerned about moving the payments up for parents from September 1 so they have it in their account and can plan and contract with instructors or therapists or whoever they want to extracurricular activities. We want it moved up to August 1st. And so that's
Yeah.
one of the parts of our bill. We're not hearing a lot of that from parents.
Mhm.
They don't even know that's part of the bill that we're working to get moved forward. But it's
Mhm.
on behalf of the parents so that they can plan. So we don't expect parents out there to spend the time that we've spent on analyzing the bill and figuring out
Right.
which parts are related. That's what we do on your behalf. And if you don't
Constantly.
understand something that we've worked on, please get in touch with us. We are so
We have a
happy
forum.
to help you
Hmm.
understand it because we want you to be informed if you're calling your legislator. We
Hmm.
almost had another incident where back in those days, we didn't have computers, we didn't have cell phones, we had landlines. And so we played a game of telephone, where you call somebody and that somebody calls.
Yeah.
And so we went to a function that first year, um, and the the legislators were kind of grouped together that were working on the home education bill, and they were talking amongst each other. So we kind of stood close enough we could hear the discussion. And one of the people who had filed a bill for the FPEA, a different sponsor than the Dan Webster, who sponsored the bill for us. We didn't have an organization, so I just say Craig and I. There were some other people that we were working with at that time, but um, he said, I have never had, oh, we played telephone. So everybody called to shut down the uh,
Oh.
calls at the Capitol, and they couldn't use their
Right.
phones calling out because there were so many incoming calls.
Hmm.
And the sponsor of the FPEA bill said, I will never support home education in the future. I have never heard from so many uninformed people in my life, and I could not use my phone all day long. So, since that time,
Mm.
I've been very careful not to send out alerts. And I said, the
Hmm.
only time I will send out an alert is if I can actually get the wording to the people so that they can say exactly what needs to be said and not things that they think might be in the bill or that they misunderstood
Certainly.
the information, because we want to appear that we know what we're talking about. Otherwise,
Hmm.
the legislators are going to dismiss everything we say and, as
Yep.
Jason said, do what they think is best. And so
That's right.
we did send out an alert. We worked about an hour and a half on getting the wording right last night with two other people who are working on
Hmm.
this issue from a different angle, but also about the wording in the bill. And
Hmm.
we try to collaborate so that all the groups working on this come forth with the same message. So unity is really important if we want to get something done at the Capitol. Fighting at the Capitol level is not a positive thing for anybody who's trying to get something passed. If you have a
No.
concern, if you have need for more information, we're here. You can contact us.
Hmm.
We're more than happy to work with you if you might see something in the bill we missed. So we're
Hmm.
happy to have input. But please don't go to the legislators and try to trash somebody else because it never works out really well.
I'd like to just add a couple of things. Can you hear
Please
me
go
okay?
for it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
as Brenda was talking, I just heard the verse in my head, a house divided against itself cannot stand. I
Mm.
know that there are those who don't consider us the same house, and by us I mean what I'm considering one house, they don't see as one house. But for
Right.
me, one house is all the parents in Florida who are teaching their children at home and trying to direct their children's education themselves. And that includes those who use private schools as an umbrella, and that includes those who have taken a scholarship, and that includes those who have not taken a scholarship, and that includes those who are PEP in statute, and that includes those who are home education directly with the county. All of us are parents teaching our children at home. We are all the same house. And we need to support each other, even if we make different choices in how we do that. We need to support each other because the reality is that eventually, if they start regulating one of these tracks, we are all still parents teaching our children at home, and they know that. They see that similarity even if we're denying it. So the regulations that come down on one track are eventually going to start coming down on the other tracks if we're not fighting for that now, starting now when it's happening. Um, if also there are those who have said that they don't think Jason and I can be advocating for anyone other than PEP students because we happen to have students who are taking PEP. I think that's a false assumption from the get go because, like I said, I consider all parents who are directing their children's education at home to be in the same house. Like, we are all parents directing our children's education, teaching our children at home. I want to support your freedoms no matter which of those tracks you're choosing. And as Brenda mentioned, there are issues in this bill that we have been working on language for and that Brenda and Jason are lobbying for that are not PEP issues. But they still majorly concern us because they affect parents who are teaching their children at home. So it
Mm.
we made a blog post the other day, just very short and sweet, a bullet point list of those like primary issues that we were concerned about with HB 1403. Um, and we can maybe drop that on the post here or something if someone wants to go see them. The instructional materials issue is the one that everybody seems to be talking about right now because it was actually written into the bill already and people saw that language and were concerned about it. But there are things that are just missing from this bill that we were trying to get added. And so that whole list of things that Brenda and Jason are lobbying for is on our website as a forum post or a blog post. I can't remember which one I did it as. Um, but it's there if you're curious. It's more than just the instructional materials issue that we have concerns about, but we do have concerns about the instructional materials issue, and we have been proposing language that would
Hmm.
protect parents' freedoms on that. The other point
And
that I
I,
wanted
oh,
the
go
other
ahead.
point I wanted to make is that I saw a post just today where somebody was um, they were kind of bashing HEF in this, but that's not my
Hmm.
concern. My concern was that in the context of their post, they were giving a rundown of how home education came to be where it is today and why PEP shouldn't be considered part of that. And the language they used was this led to that, and then eventually home education with the county became possible. I just want to point out those things didn't just happen. Like, your rights and freedoms to home educate with the county didn't just emerge naturally from the earth. Like, there were people, like Brenda was describing, there were people fighting for that, and there were people fighting against that, like, maybe all with the same goal, but with, fighting amongst each other like what's happening now, and it actually got in the way of achieving the goal, which was to have the ability to home educate your children.
Hmm.
So, I want to caution us, first of all, to realize that people
Hmm.
do need to fight for these freedoms. They don't just happen.
Hmm.
And then second of all, we shouldn't be fighting with each other. We're not the ones, like, you may disagree with how someone decides to educate their children at home, but if we're
Hmm.
fighting with each other, then we can't present a unified front to protect the freedoms that need to be protected. So, that's what I wanted to say.
Brenda, you have your hand up, but since she just ended off of that, let me add this because I think it's very important. I was reading online and I found this on Reddit, and I can't read the full thing because it's probably not appropriate, but I will read this much of it. It says more blankety fundamentalist Christian academies incoming, funneling money through your local tax-free megachurch, indoctrinating future generations of, quote, woke fighters and Republican rubes to grift from. Florida continues to regress into further stupidity. Don't even get me started on homeschooling. More generations of socially awkward and ill-equipped adults being taught by people with zero skills and the same BS fundamentalist agenda. And then there's just comment after comment after comment of this going on and on and on and being upvoted. There are very, very, very real people who just want to see you get in line and not think for yourself. And for parents to not be able to make those decisions, move about your day, let Big Daddy government handle everything for you, scoop your kids up and send them off. We'll take care of them. And there are many of us who feel like it's our, not just our right, but our absolute responsibility to be the ones directing our children and their educational path and their minds while they're impressionable and young. It's very important to ground them and found them in character and critical thinking and all of the things that come along with that. And it serves us poorly to be at each other's throats while we're trying to fight so carefully for the things that are very, very much needed to fight for. Like Crystal said, that 1960s baby blue Mustang didn't just appear in the field. Somebody went out and painstakingly built it piece by piece. Brenda has been working on home education in Florida for the last almost 4 decades, and it is something I intend to continue as she's invited me on to do that. And I thank you for asking me to carry that torch, and I intend to do so. But it's definitely something that requires all of us truly to be together and unite with our voice over, especially when issues are important and they impact each of us, regardless of how we look at each other, who's got stars on theirs and not. We are parents who are taking the full responsibility of directing our children's education, and that matters. Brenda, go ahead.
I was just going to mention because we've been accused of not caring about the FESUA parents. Well, in this
Right.
bill, there is a little section, maybe 6 lines, that says that the University of Central Florida Center for Unique Abilities and the organizations, meaning the SFOs, Step Up and AAA, will work with them to come up with a purchasing guide. Well, we think parents of children with disabilities know best what their children need. And so, what we're pushing for in that section of the bill is for a board, an advisory board of parents to be part of that discussion. And
Right.
Crystal has worked with some other of our friends to come up with a list of, I think it's 13 different
13.
disabilities that would be represented on that committee. Because right now, as much as you think you might have input with Step Up, you don't. And
Correct.
they may work with you, but if this bill passes, you're going to be way down the order. So we want you in statute to protect your right to have some input on what goes into the purchasing guide. We
That's
want it
correct.
in statute. And so that's one of the things that we're working on for the FESUA parents. And
Yeah.
there may be other things right now. I can't even remember what they are. We've got a list
Well,
of them,
when
but that's to me, that's one of the biggest things to protect the rights of FESUA parents
yes,
to be able to decide what they can purchase. And the purchasing guide is the big thing that has caused this instructional materials language to come about in this bill. So the
Yes.
purchasing guide is a really, really big deal.
It's a big deal. And whenever I saw how that statute in CS HB 1403 was written, it did not require the Center for Students with Unique Abilities to work with parents. And it does not require the scholarship funding organizations to consult with parents. It requires the center and the SFOs to work with each other. And I thought that is a massive oversight. And in the name of streamlining things and trying to make them go faster, well, it's really hard to get a hold of home educating parents, isn't it? It's really hard to get them together. So it's a whole lot easier to just not and go with what we think they need. And I could very easily see
Clarify we,
we.
not us, you, me, and Crystal.
Yeah, not us. Not us. Yeah. Yeah, it's very yeah. By we, I meant it would be very simple for these centers and the SFOs to decide that they know what's best and to just move with that rather than take the time to consult with parents, or maybe take an experience here and experience there and then run with it, but truly not necessarily having to be heard from. The way that that language is written is it does not require the parents to be a part of that process. And I thought that's massive. That's massive. There should be some requirement to at least work with parents as a board, and have them to inform the process and guide as they go along. I mean, I trust that they're going to do their research. They're a center that does research, but I want it stated. I want to see it and know that they can't just not consult with parents at some point during that process. That was really important to me.
Well,
So we
let's
worked on
just
that
point
language.
out that FESUA parents are registered as home education students.
That's correct.
So we are working on their behalf.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and the one other thing, which is probably a smaller thing for now, but the other thing that affects UA parents is we were working to get the authority of the SFOs limited so that in the future
Hmm.
they can't reimpose the spending caps that we
Hmm.
just fought to get removed, for both
Absolutely.
PEP and for UA. So
Right.
that we were wanting to have that put in statute as well, so that they can't in the future just decide to add the spending caps back,
And amend it.
or
Right.
any other limitations that aren't in statute.
Yeah. We
We
have a couple of
don't have
comments.
a representative voice with the SFOs.
Hmm.
They try to work with us and they've been
Right.
cooperative, but somebody
Yes, they have.
above them makes a decision, or another group comes in, as they have, and redefines what a home education instructional program. Well, that's affecting a lot of our parents who
Yes.
utilize those instructional programs as part of their curriculum. They pick and
Yes.
choose a class there. They don't oversee it. But there's another group
Hmm.
that's trying to attack, and we haven't talked about this, I don't think, on
No, we
this
haven't.
forum.
We haven't talked about it at all yet.
But this is a big threat to everybody. Right now, they're
Hmm.
not, the community is not recognizing it, but there's a group that are, they call themselves different things: micro schools,
Hmm.
hybrids, learning pods, maybe other things.
Be careful.
Those
They call
groups,
themselves hybrids, but they're not necessarily the hybrids that we
Not the
normally
same
refer to.
hybrids
It's
that,
not the
yeah.
same. Yeah. Yeah.
they're literally mini schools where
Yes.
a person other than the parent or parents are running the program. They
Mm.
decide the curriculum. They drop their kids off at school.
5 days a
At
week. 3.
school, 9 o'clock in the morning, pick them up at 3 in the afternoon. Um,
Hmm.
and then it's 2 or 5 days a week. Yes, the parents are part of the program, but no more than public school parents who have to help with homework.
Right.
And so they want to call themselves home education instructional programs, which, if it's allowed to continue with no definition in statute, the SFOs, because of the pressures from these other groups, have
We're going to be required
decided
to.
that they're going to remove from the definition we all agreed on after working for 6 months to come up with a definition of what is a home education instructional program, that they would remove the non-residential part of that definition so that people could operate these programs in their home. And our huge concern with that is how this is going to affect home education, PEP, FESUA, the whole movement, because the first time a newspaper picks up a report or somebody reports their child has been molested in somebody's home or they're trafficked in somebody's home, just imagine they're your child is dropped off where there's no fingerprinting, nobody to oversee the program. And how are parents going to know that these are safe places for kids? Not to mention the zoning issues and the homeowners association and on and on and on. And
Sure.
if you think the media is bad now, hold your breath. And those people that hate home
Yeah.
education are going to want, as they
They're
did in
gone.
1991, to have all parents fingerprinted before they can teach their children at home. It's just never ending if we don't
Mhm.
deal with some of these issues now instead of letting them develop and having something bad happen to a child who is
Mhm.
quote unquote a home education student. Then we've all got a fierce battle on our hands, and we may not win that one.
Well, and just to clarify, because I could see parents saying, "Well, what's the harm in having parents fingerprinted?" Brenda's mentioned this before, but logistically, it would have shut down home education because
Yeah.
the queue for actually getting fingerprints processed would have put this at like a lower priority tier, and it just never would have happened. And so
Yeah.
then those parents, if I'm remembering correctly, Brenda, you can correct me, but
Mhm.
it would have created all kinds of issues where essentially parents would have been waiting forever for approval to homeschool, and it never would have come.
And thankfully, Craig was there to also work with them at that time to help navigate, because it takes many people. We have some comments coming in. I want to read some of them. Kara Patricia says, "See, the post that Jason mentioned upsets me. I'm probably 100% on the opposite side in terms of religious and spiritual and political beliefs from HEF. But as Crystal said, we're still in the same house when it comes to parent choice and education." I think that's beautiful. And thank you for sharing that with us. And it's okay to be on opposite ends and protect the same thing that we love and want to see protected. That's quite all right. Nicolette Fisher says, "I'm speechless over that. As a former New Yorker, I went to public school and felt more awkward than my children that I currently homeschool. Some of these people need to make their way into actual classrooms to see what these teachers deal with 90% of the time and are able to teach." Yeah, you're
Excuse,
not wrong.
excuse me, I'm getting a call from the
You
Capitol.
take
I
it.
will
Yeah, take
have
it.
to
Just
go
mute
take.
yourself. Yeah. Yeah, you're good.
Hello.
Oh, she didn't mute herself. I got it. There we go. If she comes back, I'll have her unmute. But yay, a call from the Capitol. So that's great. Sue texted me and said, "Let's switch to some positive things," and I don't disagree with her. I was feeling that nudging as well. Barbara says we should just shut down PEP at this point if we are at risk of losing our rights to home educating my children, then we need to shut it down. So, okay, that's a great thing that you brought up because I think that's very important to address. PEP is not going anywhere. They don't want to shut it down. It's likely not going to get shut down. And one of the reasons why Brenda initially had PEP, even though it is parent directed education, the same way as home education is, separated out to become a different path is so that when oversight steps in to PEP, it doesn't impact home education as its own standing thing. It will
Yeah.
impact PEP and it will impact the way home educating looks for parents who are in the PEP scholarship program, whose children are in the PEP scholarship program. But it won't impact the home education programs.
Yeah, the home education statutes are protected because of the way Brenda was able to get them separated
Mm-hmm.
out. So PEP is a separate track. However,
Mm-hmm.
it will affect, I believe, eventually UA families because
Yeah.
if they're restricting one scholarship used by those who teach their children at home, it's not a very difficult logical leap to start restricting other scholarships
Mm.
used by families who teach their children at home. So
Yeah, and Beverly.
my point in the fact that this would affect other homeschoolers, it's not just a PEP issue,
No, yeah.
is that even if you are home educating with the county, but you're taking a UA scholarship,
Mm-hmm.
this restriction is not just a PEP issue long term. Right now, it's a
No,
PEP
it's a
issue.
scholarship issue.
It's a scholarship issue, and right now they've only added the restriction in this bill for PEP.
Mm-hmm.
But we've already seen that they're trying to change the way the purchasing guide for UA is created, which is why we are pushing for the parent advisory board to be included as part of that process. But if they're going to restrict the parent's freedom to choose how to utilize the funds in one scholarship,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably not going to be very much longer before they feel the need to restrict how
Right.
parents
And
use a different scholarship.
Beverly Francis says all good reasons to say no to government funding. They will absolutely come after independent home educators, which is why the community is vehemently against the PEP program. I understand the desire to not have the government interfering with independent home educators. However, I think, Beverly, if I can be so kind as to just say that I think you're off a little bit in, yes, the funding, but this is not really impacting home education as it stands by itself. Most of these changes are impacting the way that parents home educate or direct their education at home with scholarship money. No one's trying to say that any of these parents at home can't teach any of these subjects or can't do what they want to do. They created the scholarship program as a way to kind of give people with fewer resources more opportunities to flesh out their home educating programs. They just want to rein that in now.
Yeah, and I
And
believe that there is nothing in HB 1403 that addresses home education with the county at
correct.
all. It is only
Correct.
in regards to the EO scholarships, the UA
Mm-hmm.
scholarship, and PEP scholarship. It's scholarship-related issues for
Yeah.
this bill.
And
But they
none of
do
the
affect
rationalization has to do with home educating parents shouldn't have access to this or shouldn't be able to do that or any of
now,
those things.
the thing that does affect all home educators is the way that we are perceived as we navigate these issues. If we're seen in the public fighting amongst each other and we can't even agree on
Mm-hmm.
what our concerns are, then those who aren't as familiar with home education are going to just paint all home educators with a broad brush and say all of them have no clue what they want, all of them are uninformed, all of them, and that's where it
Mm-hmm.
does affect all of us, and we need to be
Yeah.
careful how we're navigating this.
Sure. And Deb Snell says the schools buy the same things, PE equipment, etc. So I think that's something to keep in mind, though we want to be careful using that rationale because we aren't necessarily trying to justify home education to look like public education. We really want to justify home educating to look as free and open as it always is, right? Like we're driving down the road and we're doing math in the car and it's constant and it's talking and my kids want to dig a hole and then we talk about, water displacement when they show stuff back in the hole and different things like that. It's just one of those things that we aren't necessarily trying to use our justifications by saying like, oh, well, the public school kids get it. We should too, because we aren't really looking to make home education
No, but
public
there are
school at
some
home.
representatives who care about that because they're
That's
looking
true.
at it, from the perspective of
That's true.
equity. Um,
Yeah.
so that has been,
The equal opportunities.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that has been a useful common ground when we've been having
Mm-hmm.
discussions with people to say, like parents who are choosing to home educate their children with this scholarship now wouldn't have access to these things. That has been a useful kind of like common ground that we've been able to find for people who care about equity for students in all tracks of education. But yeah, Jason's right that we have to be careful using that as our grounding logic, only because home education doesn't always look like public education, and we don't want it to have to, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So Miranda Padilla says, and this one's a little long, so I'll just read it. I'll read it. Speaking from a hybrid school parent that has an actual school location, we do not want to call ourselves home education program parents. We want to be recognized as private school with private school privileges, FTC, FESEO, especially because we do comply with private school standards and requirements. So you may hear us speaking at the committee meetings. That's interesting. Yeah, because the bill is very vague. Yep, just like it is for PEP families. Yes, it is. Also, if we follow private school standards, which include fingerprinting for parents and teachers, then our children are not in any more danger than any other parent educating. It jumped. I'm sorry. Than any other parent educating their children. I respect every option every family needs to make for their families, and this is our best option for our family. I'm in here because they are trying to lump us with PEP, which we know we aren't. But I want to make aware that this is the route. Yeah, absolutely. And Miranda, thank you for speaking up to that. Those are also parent directed options, and we do try to keep those in mind. We try to keep you in mind while we're lobbying as well, because all of these things impact the reasoning and rationale and concerns and how things are addressed and approached by legislation. Excuse me. Car Patricia says, we are only as strong as we are united, as weak as we are divided. We can all educate our children at home with the separate classifications that HEF fought to get for PEP compared to home-educated families, but we all still have the same goals. Having the choice to educate our children the way we see fit. I really wish I heard more people like you speaking online, because I hear a lot of negativity, and it weighs heavily. Believe it or not, it does weigh heavily. But it's so beautiful to hear your voice and hear you saying that, especially knowing that you see us at odds with each other when it comes to spiritual and political views. So I really value your comments here. Thank you. But in the States with ESA programs, we are seeing legislative attacks on the ESA, but because the legislators and public are not clear that there is a legal difference between home educators and ESA families, the legislation has dangerously enfolded the independent home educators as well. In New Hampshire, yes, when it's not specifically stated out, but in Florida, not New Hampshire, but in Florida's education paths, as a definition, it's separated out and split. So any adjustments that they make to the PEP program will be to the PEP program. They'll stay encapsulated and enclosed to the scholarship program. Correct. On any parent leading.
If you want to ask her to.
Hi, Brenda. You are muted, so if you want to speak, you'll have to unmute yourself. I didn't want your call to accidentally come through the mic. There's another bill requiring New Hampshire. I'm not familiar with what's going on in New Hampshire right now. We're so deep right now in Florida. The sponsors deliberately roped in the independent students who are governed. Yeah, you'd think you'd be learning from the other states' lived experience and strengthen the FL firewall. It is pretty strong, actually, by the way it's written, because changes to the PEP program don't impact changes to the independent home educators. I think maybe if more people spent time really combing through how it's written and became aware of that, they might not approach this topic with so much fear. And then we could probably collaborate a little bit better on actual solutions to the scholarship program. Do you all have any thoughts on how PEP can continue support for equipment in non-core subjects in the environment where the press is aggressively reporting on what is seen to be irresponsible spending? That's a great question. It's tough to say how to support that best. I don't know, Brenda, if you want to speak in, feel free to, but I'll take a stab at it. So do you have any thoughts on PEP can support? Ultimately, if the bill goes through the way that it's written right now, HB 1403, CSHB 1403, it would limit equipment as instructional materials for the 4 core subjects.
To the 4
core subjects, and your ways around those would be a home education instructional program that includes equipment costs in its tuition. So if it's lumping in everything your child would need for that as a cost to it, that would be one way.
Yeah,
The other
because to
way,
clarify, they're not restricting lessons or classes, and
right?
they're not even restricting general instructional materials.
Mm-hmm.
But the definition of what
Right.
falls within that is a little nebulous. But they're restricting equipment used as instructional materials
And the
to
other way
only
around
those
it
4 core subjects.
would likely be encouraging vendors who supply a curriculum to pack a curriculum with, say, an instrument or something that goes inside the curriculum as a whole, and then sell it as a whole unit, because um, that would be purchasing the curriculum at that point if it's all lumped together. I think it's in itemizing it out that it's a bit more scrutinized.
I
But
thought maybe the
that
person was asking if we saw a way in the language of the bill to amend it to where it would still protect that, but also address the concerns from all these newspaper articles and stuff. I thought maybe that was what they were asking.
maybe they are.
So if that's what you're asking,
Yeah.
yes, Brenda, Jason, and I, and a couple of the ladies that you saw on
Yes.
last week, we have been
Yeah.
working very hard on language that Brenda and Jason have been lobbying
Hmm.
for, that we feel it preserves those freedoms, but also addresses some fiscal accountability concerns.
Yeah. Their
And
main
that's
concern is
probably
the
about as
fiscal.
specific as I can get. But
Yeah.
yeah, we feel like it would achieve both if we can just get it in the hands of the right
Right.
person to push it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do have language that we put together that does achieve both. Um, it's just a matter of whether or not one, we can get enough time with them and it's not a passing hall conversation where we can lay out the real issue and how it solves it. We've been being pushed about, so that's the real struggle there. Thank you, Crystal, for clarifying. I think it's very important that all that home educate their children to remember we all sacrifice and have the best interest of our children at heart, regardless if we choose to use the scholarship or not. That's great. Thank you. Barbara says that has to do with attendance, changing the language of hours of education deemed necessary to qualify as a private school. I lost it. Jump down. There we go. Okay.
What
I
does
think that
she mean
was
that what,
I
Jason? Clarify.
One of the
that
people
was
in the comments said that they run a hybrid in the other sense of the hybrid, not a micro school, but a hybrid private school that does meet all the private school requirements, and that she was planning to try to attend the committees to speak because people are trying to lump them in with home education, and they're not. They're private school. They've gone through the steps to be a private school. And so she's trying to keep that clear delineation of, this is what we are. So that's what that was in reference to.
And we're
mm-hmm,
aware of that. I mean, that was what we were going to try to discuss on today's
mm-hmm,
live stream. But the two other ladies that were on here last week felt it was more important to spend their time getting people to call the Capitol. And I agree.
yeah,
Please look at our alert that we sent out and make your
mm-hmm,
calls to the speaker's office, the governor's office, especially,
mm-hmm.
because I
I
think that's
tweeted him.
huh?
I tweeted him like his Twitter handle. Well, it's not Twitter anymore; it's X. But I X'd him, I guess, um, from HEF as well. So you all can do the same. Twitter does work. Sorry, go ahead.
Just be sure that you're clear in what you're
Mm-hmm.
asking. And right now, we're just asking that this bill be TP'd until we can get some amendments.
Temporarily postponed is what TP means. I didn't know that. They kept throwing that around. So
Yeah, not
now
TP
you're,
like when the kids take toilet paper rolls to someone's house. Not that kind of TP, but temporarily postponed.
yeah. We have a couple more. And Deline says, Brenda took risks and fought hard for homeschooling by Florida legislation and paved the way for my family. PEP is a new frontier. of homeschooling. We can't just give up, risky or not. Our Florida children need this, and our governor is homeschooling friendly. So don't get discouraged, people. Yeah, absolutely. Holly says, I am forever grateful for the fight you are doing for our parental freedoms. We should all be supporting HEF. You are all working so hard for our families. My husband and I are very grateful for what you do. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Um, Joanne says, thank you, Brenda, Crystal, and Jason, for all that you have done already and what you are going to and what you are doing now to protect our homeschooling freedoms. We are all on the same team, and you have my full support. Karen says it's separate in New Hampshire too, and it's spilling over. Karen, we're here watching every step of the way, and we will be alerting and calling people in and making meetings, and we will be fighting to keep that separate here. So maybe New Hampshire needs a Brenda, needs Brenda. And then Cara Patricia speaks again and says, that's a good point. I know that when HB 1 2023 was originally written, the intent was to umbrella all home educated students. HEF and other organizations work to get the language changed to differentiate. And I would think they'll continue to draw those distinctions when they are given the chance. Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, absolutely. The problem right now, especially from what I can see, is they aren't being given the opportunity to work on HB 14 through legislators. That is the issue we're running into right now. Everything feels oddly rushed and slam packed, TP'd. Yeah, TP'd, like toilet papered. They're trying to toilet paper the bill. And Cara says,
I
I
hate
totally
to
picture.
leave, but I've got another
Yeah.
call to be on at 1:00, so we need to
Okay.
be making other calls as well. We need to wrap
Yeah,
up.
we do. We do. We are going to wrap it up. So, thank you all for being here today and hearing out the concerns. Thank you for your time and attention. Continue to pray if that's something that you do. And if it's not, Cara, whatever it is that you do that in support for us. And if you need
See the
anything,
blog post for who to contact to
reach
request
out to
the
us.
TP.
Yes, see the blog post. If you want, same handle, FLHEF 1985. I did tag Governor Ron DeSantis in the one that I posted, so you could go and bump that one up or retweet it. Just go and retweet it if you want to, and make sure that it's there, retagged and retweeted if you're on Twitter. If not, no worries, no foul. You don't even necessarily have to write a separate one. So we will let Brenda go, and I will probably be joining her on that call, whatever it is. And to the rest of you, we bid you farewell and adieu until next time. Thank you all again for your support, your attention, and thank you to our top sponsor, FPEA. We really, really love and appreciate all of you all, and we hope that you have a wonderful Monday.
Thank you.